The Connecticut sky hung gray and heavy over the Votsakorsky factory in Stratford, March 1940. Inside the cavernous hangar, Chief Engineer Rex Beisel stood beneath the strangest aircraft most workers had ever seen. The XF-4U prototype's inverted gull wings swept down from the fuselage like a seabird diving for prey, its massive propeller clearing the ground by mere inches. "Mr. Beisel, the Navy brass are here," his assistant called nervously. 3 officers approached, their polished shoes clicking against the concrete. Commander James Flatley circled the aircraft slowly, his weathered face unreadable. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "Those wings." Flatley finally spoke, touching the unusual bend. "Explain." Beisel cleared his throat. "The Pratt & Whitney R-2800 engine produces 2,000 horsepower. We needed a 13-foot propeller to harness that power. Conventional straight wings would require impossibly long landing gear. The inverted gull design solves both problems: maximum propeller clearance with minimum gear length." "And the performance?" another officer asked skeptically. "We're projecting over 400 miles per hour, sir. Fastest fighter in the world." Flatley's eyes narrowed. "Project away, Mr. Beisel. But can you deliver it before this war reaches our doorstep?" Outside, storm clouds gathered over Long Island Sound, and somewhere across the Pacific, other engineers were designing their own fighters. Tokyo Imperial University's engineering department buzzed with urgent activity. November 1941. Professor Jiro Horikoshi adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, studying intelligence photographs spread across his desk. His team had designed the Zero, the Imperial Navy's premier fighter, and their confidence was absolute. "Professor, these are the American designs," his assistant Tanaka said, placing new photographs before him. "The F-4U Corsair." Horikoshi examined the images with scientific precision. The bent wings, the enormous engine cowling, the sheer bulk of the machine. He passed the photos to his colleagues, who began to chuckle. "Americans always prioritize brute force over elegance," Horikoshi observed calmly. "Look at this weight, over 14,000 pounds fully loaded. Our Zero weighs barely 6,000. Engineer Saburo Sakai leaned forward. "The wing structure appears unnecessarily complex. Those inverted gull wings will create maintenance nightmares in field conditions." "And that massive engine," Tanaka added. "Fuel consumption will limit their range significantly. Our pilots can fly twice as far." Horikoshi nodded thoughtfully. "The Zero can outmaneuver anything in the sky. It climbs faster, turns tighter, and our pilots are the finest in the world. This American bent-wing monster may be fast in a straight line, but air combat isn't won on straight lines." Outside his window, Tokyo's lights glittered in the November darkness. In 1 week, those lights would burn for very different reasons. Guadalcanal's Henderson Field shimmered in the brutal August heat of 1942. Lieutenant Ken Walsh wiped sweat from his eyes, standing beside his F-4U Corsair. The aircraft's dark blue paint absorbed the tropical sun mercilessly. Around him, marine mechanics worked frantically on the squadron's fighters. "She's a beast to land, Lieutenant," Sergeant Mike Rodriguez warned, tightening a panel. "That long nose blocks your view of the deck completely. We've lost 3 pilots in training accidents already." Walsh ran his hand along the wing's distinctive bend. "The Navy rejected it for carrier operations. Called it too dangerous. So now we Marines get to prove them wrong from this muddy strip." The air raid siren wailed suddenly. Distant dots appeared over the Solomon Sea Zeros, perhaps 20 of them. "Scramble! Scramble!" The tower's voice cracked with urgency. Walsh's hands moved through the startup sequence automatically. The massive R-2800 engine roared to life, drowning out everything else. His Corsair thundered down the steel matting runway, the bent wings lifting him into the humid air. At 20,000 feet, he spotted them. The Zeros flew in perfect formation, elegant and deadly. His radio crackled. "Remember your training. Don't dogfight them. Use your speed and dive on them." Walsh pushed the stick forward. His Corsair accelerated past 400 miles per hour, screaming toward the enemy formation like a blue meteor. Rabaul Air Base, Japanese-controlled New Britain, September 1942. Professor Horikoshi stood in the debriefing room, his confidence from 10 months earlier now tinged with concern. Before him sat Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, one of Japan's most skilled pilots, his left eye bandaged from a recent engagement. "Tell me about the Corsair again," Horikoshi requested quietly. Sakai's good eye focused intensely. "It's not what we expected, Professor. When they dive on us, there's no escape. They come from above at speeds we cannot match. By the time we turn to engage, they're already climbing back to altitude." "But surely in a turning fight—" "They won't turn with us," Sakai interrupted, his voice tight with frustration. "Their commanders have learned. They use energy tactics, dive, shoot, climb, repeat. Our advantages in maneuverability become irrelevant." Horikoshi studied his notes. Intelligence reports confirmed increasing Corsair deployments. American pilots were calling it the Whistling Death because of the sound it made diving at high speed through its wing root air intakes. "And their firepower?" Horikoshi asked. 6.50 caliber machine guns. "When they hit you, Professor, there's nothing left." Sakai paused. "We mocked their brute force approach. But perhaps brute force, properly applied, is its own kind of elegance." Outside, mechanics worked on damaged Zeros. More aircraft limped back daily, shot through with large-caliber holes. The engineers' early confidence seemed like a memory from another lifetime. Espiritu Santo Naval Base, New Hebrides, February 1943. The pilot's ready room smelled of coffee, cigarette smoke, and nervous sweat. Major Gregory "Pappy" Boyington stood before his newly formed squadron, VMF 214, soon to be legendary as the Black Sheep. "Gentlemen, the Corsair has a reputation," Boyington began, his gravelly voice commanding attention. "The Navy calls it the Ensign Eliminator. They say it's killed more of our pilots in landing accidents than the Japanese have in combat. They've banned it from carrier operations." Uncomfortable shifting among the assembled pilots. Everyone had heard the stories: the terrible forward visibility, the tendency to stall without warning, the brutal snap to port if you botched a landing. "But I've flown her for 3 months now," Boyington continued, "and I'm here to tell you the bent-wing bird isn't a widow-maker, it's a widow-creator. 4 Japanese widows." Nervous laughter rippled through the room. "This machine is faster than anything they have. It climbs like a homesick angel. Those 6.50 calories will saw a zero in half. Yes, she's unforgiving. Yes, you need to respect her. But master the Corsair, and you become death itself in the Pacific sky." Boyington walked to the window, watching Corsairs take off into the tropical dusk. The Japanese mocked this fighter when they first saw the designs. Now their pilots pray they don't encounter us. Let's give them more reasons to pray. Rabaul, April 1943. The operations room felt suffocating despite the ceiling fan's futile efforts. Commander Minoru Genda reviewed the latest loss reports, each number a fresh wound. Beside him, Professor Horikoshi had aged noticeably since his last visit. 2 months ago, we were trading losses 1-for-1 with the Americans, Genda said flatly. Now the ratio is shifting. For every Corsair we shoot down, we lose 3, sometimes 4 zeros. Horikoshi studied the combat reports with growing dismay. The patterns were unmistakable. American pilots had refined their tactics into a brutal science: high-altitude patrol, high-speed diving attacks, immediate disengagement before Japanese fighters could close. Their planes can absorb tremendous damage, Genda continued. Last week, one of our pilots put 40 rounds into a Corsair. The American flew it back to Guadalcanal and landed safely. Meanwhile, a single burst from their .50 calibers destroys our aircraft. The Zero was designed for different priorities, Horikoshi said defensively. Maneuverability, range, climb rate. At the cost of armor and durability, Genda interrupted. Priorities that made sense in 1940 but are killing our pilots in 1943. The Americans designed the Corsair to take punishment and deliver devastation. We designed the Zero to be an elegant dancing master. But the Americans refused to dance. Through the window, another formation of Zeros departed for combat patrol. Horikoshi wondered how many would return. The fighter he'd been so proud of suddenly felt like a relic from a more innocent time. Over Bougainville, June 1943. Pappy Boyington's Corsair banked hard left, his wingmen tight in formation. Below, the green jungle canopy stretched endlessly. Above, scattered clouds provided perfect ambush positions. Bandit, 2 o'clock high. His wingman's voice crackled urgently. Boyington spotted them immediately, 6 Zeros, descending to engage. In the early days, this would have been a terrifying moment. Not anymore. Black Sheep, extend and climb. Use your speed. The Corsair's powerful engines roared, accelerating away from the Zeros while simultaneously climbing. The Japanese pilots gave chase, exactly as expected. They were thinking traditionally: close the distance, enter a turning dogfight, leverage superior maneuverability. But Boyington had 2,000 horsepower and an aircraft that could dive at 450 miles per hour. "Now!" he commanded. 4 Corsairs rolled inverted and plummeted. The Zero pilots, committed to their climb, couldn't react quickly enough. Boyington's gun sight settled on the lead fighter. His thumb pressed the trigger. 6.50 caliber machine guns unleashed a devastating stream. The Zero disintegrated into burning fragments. 3 more Zeros fell in seconds. The survivors scattered, diving for the jungle. "Break off. Don't chase them into the weeds," Boyington ordered. Marines had learned that lesson the hard way. Flying back to base, Boyington reflected on the evolution. The Japanese had mocked the Corsair's unconventional design. Now they died because of it. Tokyo, September 1943. The emergency meeting convened in the Naval Ministry's underground conference room. Professor Horikoshi presented his findings to somber-faced admirals. The statistics were undeniable and devastating. The F-4U Corsair now operates from 17 forward bases across the Pacific, Horikoshi reported, his voice steady despite the implications. American production has reached 400 units per month. Our intelligence confirms their pilots have achieved air superiority in every sector where Corsairs deploy in significant numbers. Admiral Ugaki leaned forward. "What are our options?" "We're developing the J-2M Raiden," Horikoshi explained, displaying new designs. "Heavier armament, better armor protection, higher speed. But production won't reach meaningful numbers until mid-1944. "And our current pilots?" another admiral asked. Horikoshi hesitated. "They're instructed to avoid direct engagement with Corsairs when possible. Engage only with numerical superiority and altitude advantage. If Corsairs have the height, disengage immediately." The room fell silent. These weren't instructions for victory, they were instructions for survival. "The Americans called their bent-wing fighter Whistling Death," Ugaki said quietly. "Our pilots call it the aircraft that cannot be fought. We mocked their brute force engineering. We were fools." Outside, Tokyo prepared for another night under blackout conditions. The war that had seemed so promising 30 months ago was slipping away, one Corsair engagement at a time. Philippine Sea, June 19, 1944. Lieutenant Alex Vreeshew adjusted his oxygen mask at 25,000 feet, his Corsair leading a division of 4 fighters. Below, the greatest carrier battle of the war was unfolding. The radio chatter was nearly constant, hundreds of aircraft engaged across miles of ocean and sky. Large raid bearing 265, 20 miles out. Looks like 50-plus contacts. Vreeshew's division turned to intercept. Within minutes, he spotted them, Japanese carrier aircraft, including newer models attempting to reach the American fleet. But the technology gap had become a chasm. American radar gave perfect warning. The Corsairs and Hellcats had altitude advantage. The outcome was predictable. Tally-ho! Engaging. What followed felt less like combat and more like execution. Vreeshew's first burst caught a Judy dive bomber. It exploded instantly. His second burst shredded a Jill torpedo bomber. Third burst, fourth burst, each trigger press resulted in a kill. The Japanese aircraft, many flown by newly trained pilots, stood no chance against experienced Americans in superior aircraft. In 6 minutes, Vreeshew shot down 6 enemy aircraft. Across the Philippine Sea, similar scenes repeated hundreds of times. American pilots would later call it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Landing back on USS Lexington, Vreeshew climbed from his Corsair's cockpit, 6-finger guns raised for the deck camera. Behind him, the bent-wing bird that Japanese engineers had once dismissed bore fresh gun smokestains, but not a single bullet hole. At Tsuji Airfield, Japan, August 1945. Professor Horikoshi stood in the ruins of his design office, American B-29 raids having reduced much of the facility to rubble. In his hand, he held a captured American aviation magazine featuring a detailed article about the F-4U Corsair. The statistics told the complete story. The Corsair had achieved an 11-to-1 kill ratio against Japanese aircraft. Over 2,000 enemy planes destroyed. F-4U pilots had produced more aces than any other Allied fighter. The bent-wing bird had been deployed from carriers after initial problems were resolved, the very platform the Navy thought impossible. Horikoshi read the American engineers' interviews about the design philosophy. We built it to survive, to hit hard, and to keep fighting. Elegance was secondary to effectiveness. He thought about his Zero, graceful, maneuverable, a masterpiece of weight-saving engineering. But those qualities couldn't compete against armored cockpits, self-sealing fuel tanks, and overwhelming firepower. Different philosophies, different outcomes. Through the shattered window, Horikoshi watched American Corsairs flying patrol over defeated Japan. Their distinctive inverted gull wings caught the morning sun. Once, those wings had seemed unnecessarily complex, even comical. Now they represented everything his team had failed to anticipate, that sometimes the simplest path isn't the best path, that brute force properly engineered becomes an art form itself. The bent-wing bird they'd mocked had ruled the Pacific sky. History would remember who was right.